Well, welcome to our first inaugural kitchen table conversations, all of you. Good to see all of you. I'm sad that we're not able to actually be in person as we've always done within the Men and Masculine Folks Network. Um, my name is Peng, and I use he and him pronouns, and I'm here in the Twin Cities. Part of why we wanted to host kitchen table conversations is really for all of us as men and masculine folks throughout the state of Minnesota to really come into conversations, to really just process like what's been happening in our lives and to create either a virtual space or a way for men and masculine folks to actually connect and explore masculinity and manhood and violence in their own lives and how they navigate that, right? What we found in the network is that it's really important for men and masculine folks to have these spaces to be able to process those things. So our hope with the kitchen table conversations is that for all of us and all of you who are watching us and listening to us is that you can actually then take these conversations and continue it in your own homes or in your own church congregations or in your own neighborhoods and organize some of the men and masculine folks in your network to have and continue these dialogues, right? We wanted to also showcase that how men and masculine folks can really have genuine, organic, authentic conversations where we explore our own curiosities and our own fears and our own suspicions and doubts about manhood and masculinity and violence. It relates to also current events that are happening in the world and in the community and even in our own state or even in our own local municipalities as well too. So we hope that you get some good ideas about how to design conversations from this and that you let the series of conversations that you're going to listen and partake with us and participate with us, that these also be starter conversations for you all to continue to have these conversations in community as well. And please let us know how it goes, but this is our first one. And so we welcome all of you to join all of us. And so I'm gonna pass it on to Ed and to share where he's from. Ed, you're on mute.
I am on mute. Hello, my name is Ed Heisler, and I'm here in Duluth, Minnesota, actually with a little small view of Lake Superior. Right now I use he and him pronouns, and I'm just like super thrilled to be actually in the same place at the same time with the four of you. I wish we were at an actual kitchen table together. Yes. This is definitely the next best thing. So.
Yes. Oh, Felix, you're on mute.
Here we go. Hi everyone. My name is Felix Martinez. I use the pronouns he, him, and his. I work for Casa Esperanza as a man and boys engagement coordinator. I'm super excited also to be here with all of you guys and to have a chance to share a little bit of as a man what I've been going through and my experiences with me, my family, and co-workers and the people around me. So I'm very excited and thank you for the invitation.
Hey everybody, my name is Sean Hayes and my pronouns are he, him, and his. Also psyched to be a part of this conversation. I'm here in my home in Duluth, Minnesota, and this is much needed for me at least, you know, excited to see where our conversation goes from here.
Thank you. I mean, we all know each other and we've all been in spaces and have built relationships in the last few years through the Men and Masculine Folks Network, and hoping that all of you that are participating with us are also going to join us and continue these conversations with us as well. And so, you know, since it's been like a while since we've all connected, right? Since COVID had hit our lives and we stopped seeing each other and being in relationship with each other. Like, where are you and what's been happening in your life, and how are you exploring and navigating masculinity, violence, and manhood in the age of COVID, right? So just share a little bit about where you're at and what's happening, and we can move from there into other conversations.
I guess I can start. Again, hi, I'm Felix. This has been very challenging going through what we're all going through. I'm a father of two teenager girls, 18 and 16. So we have one who actually started today college. It's been very challenging, and at the same time a blessing, having the family around, spending more time with the family. But challenging when we talk about working, being 24/7, all together in the same room, uh, trying to get time to ourselves. Also, it's kind of hard. Also having two pets and a total now in the house. But it's been very challenging as a man. Obviously, I'm the kind of person that I need my time. I need to once in a while take my time, isolate myself in a space where I can let things go, meditate maybe. And it's been hard because the misinformation that we also get with the related to COVID. You hear things from one side, media saying some things, and Facebook you read other things. So it's been challenging as a man. We always have this expectation that men are the ones who need to make the decisions in the house. That's something that have changed a lot in my house since I started learning more about masculinity and how I can be a better role model, how I can be a better father, husband. So having these expectations sometimes put a lot of pressure and trying to be sure everything is done the right way. But when we're uh, using these expectations, it just kind of, in my personal life, it kind of affect me, uh, especially because we don't know what's going on. Because I don't know, is it going to be a solution or a cure for what we're going through? So it put a little bit of pressure on me, but at the same time, it reminded me the importance of empower the women in my house, being a better supporter, understanding that same way I'm going through this situation, my wife is going through the same situation, my daughters are going through the same situation. So how I could support them better, how I can uh, get information and be sure I can share with my family, with my daughters too, especially the one that's going to college now. Now she's 18, she's moving to a college that's like 3 hours and a half from home, so she's not gonna be close to us. So how I can be sure that I can provide her with information and she feels secure and she understands that she can make good decisions. And once in a while we're gonna make wrong decisions too, but she can be a better person and can be sure that she's safe and the people around her are safe at the same time. So this situation with the COVID for me has been stressful. It's been a learning experience for me too. But at the same time, remind me the importance of family and as a man, how I can support other men, support family members, and be sure we can start changing those stereotypes and support better each other. So yeah, I think this quick history of what I'm going through right now. That still learning, still trying to be a better man, but at the same time, regarding all this pressure that I have, but at the same time, how I can, be a better example for others.
I can relate to that because I think about like especially being a father in this time is really challenging because I'm on the computer all day long, and then my son, I have an 8-year-old, and he's on the computer all day long gaming, which we know for boys that's actually not the healthiest in some ways, unless because then he's always who knows who's he's playing games with online, right? As an 8-year-old, and I hope and he would be spending this time obviously in school, and if school's starting, and he'd be in school, and then he wouldn't spend so much time online, and he's got like two things going on at the same time as well too. Like he's got the computer going on and the iPad next to him, and it's like, okay, how do I help you disengage, right? But then I can't disengage from my own meetings as well too. Whereas when we were in what we did previously was that he'd go to school and then come back, and then we'd be able to spend some time together, and he would spend less time, less screen time, right? And then it's really challenging because it's like, well, you shouldn't be on the screen that much, but then I'm stuck on my screen because then I can't go and get him to go and do something different as well too. And so I think that it's been challenging as a father to cultivate and build relationship and closeness with him during these periods, because he's in his room and I'm in my office, and it's like, I know he's next door and I know he's there, but like the only time we see each other is when we eat, and that's pretty much it. And sometimes he doesn't even eat anymore with us, and so he's just eating while he's gaming. It's like, no, we need to turn this off, right? And so I think that for me has been really challenging in this moment, because there's just so much happening at this moment as well too, especially um, because of all of the rebellions and uprising that's happening as well too in the moment. And so it's like, oh, just trying to organize and move people, and being on cause, and then trying to also maintain being a good father in that, especially then being expecting, we're expecting a newborn in the next couple of weeks here. And so trying to also manage that and navigate that to being a good partner to my partner as well too, so that she feels supported in it as well, and I'm not able to keep up with all of that. The only thing that I can keep up with at some time is what's actually in me only, and I can't even maintain that as well at times. Horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, I can appreciate all of that. And congratulations, Felix, on your daughter going to college. That's exciting and a big first step. And it makes me think, I actually live alone. So my situation is very different from the two that you're describing. And the idea of trying to participate and like reduce the risk for other people moving in the world just makes me think about how much of a challenge that is, because it's enough just to worry about how to move myself around in the world and try to be safe and try not to put other people at risk. So it's definitely a different thing. And one of the things that I notice, I think you mentioned, Felix, in paying with like the demands of work and all that, like you're talking about finding time to yourself and the ability to kind of create that space to have some of the time alone that can be so needed. And in my case, it's actually a lot of time alone. And so very opposite. It seems like it's a time when when there's sort of extremes happening on all ends of the spectrum, right? So so I've spent a lot of time with myself, and one of the things that I noticed, and I think it does relate a lot to how we are as men and masculine folks, is I really miss human contact, being in contact with other people of all genders, with family, with friends, with coworkers, with just being in spaces that have the energy of people. And then like touch and hugs are like really something. I mean, I miss the thing where you get hugs on almost a daily basis in a really deep way. There's just something about what happens when we're actually able to touch each other and show love and show affection that men oftentimes aren't great at expressing that's what's going on, and we aren't always all that great even at asking for it or being clear about how we need it. But it's certainly clear to me during this period of time that that when we actually are in a position where for our safety and the safety of others, we're supposed to remain separated, it really brings out how much of a gift and how good it is to actually be in connection and be able to touch and be able to be connected with one another. So I'm missing that pretty badly. I have, family that lives in the region, and then in a much more extended region, and friends all over the place, and a partner that lives in a different that lives in Canada. So it's like there's a lot to sort of figure out when it comes to terms of trying to connect with people, and there's different risks that exist across all of those places. So again, I really am finding that like I miss the ability to have extended periods of time with people. I feel the separation that happens from the fear that we have of the virus and of the virus spreading, and so just a lot of gratitude for the ways that we can connect. But I think that sort of connection, there's actually a lesson to be learned about how valuable connection and touch and being in space with one another actually is. And then, you know, in my case, like, you know, the reality for like work, I think work for everybody got way more complicated when a pandemic hit. And then George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis by police. Now you got Jacob Blake not too far away in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the social upheaval and the, you know, very, very justified and good sort of reaction to the reality that a blind eye can't be turned to the systematic ways that that Black folks in particular are both like devalued, dehumanized, and treated with violence systematically in our communities has been happening. Like that's a really big thing. And one of the things that I see is that like we all are feeling it in some new and some different ways. So like I just saw the thing where like the Milwaukee Bucks did a boycott of their game, and it kicked off boycotts across all the different leagues. And when you read some of what's going on there, like, you know, you can't have an NBA team. So the Bucks actually, when they're making a statement about what they're doing, one of their players was tased and had a knee put on his neck for a parking violation in Milwaukee, not too far from Kenosha, right? So like you can't even have a professional athletic team making a statement without it cascading into other people who have had similar experiences. And I think that that's what our communities are built up of now. And you hear, whether you're talking about the NBA boycotts or whether you think about the ways that I feel situated in my community, like just saying things like Black Lives Matter isn't actually enough. It doesn't cut it. The slogans and the bumper stickers aren't enough. And yet men oftentimes want to get out there and just solve the whole thing too, right? Like go out there and be a part of the solution and feel good about the whole thing being solved. And it's a time when showing up to support things, putting resources towards things, like it matters really when we show up, how we show up, what we do. And it also matters how we're caring for ourselves in a way where we can continue to show up and be in places that are needed, because this appears like it's going to be a period in history that's going to, you know, it's going to include a lot of change. And so I feel this tension about this lack of connection to people, about the pressures that exist from all the things that need to change in society, the amount of time that it actually takes to like try to care for myself and remain healthy, which I heard in what Peng was saying too, and balanced with the reality that a lot of people, so many of us, are hurting in different ways, whether it's from systematic stuff or whether it's from the individual things that we're facing in our lives. And so trying to be in good relationship with all of that, and not try to be a perfectionist solver of all problems, who's ignoring my own feelings in the way that masculinity would suggest is a piece of my equation.
I think, you know, what you're bringing up, Ed, is really important. You know, a couple of things that I was thinking when you were sharing was that I think it's easy for us as masculine identified folks and men folks, and I know I do this often too, is to just keep moving and not actually sit with like the hurt, right? Or sit with like this loneliness feeling, or sit with like this pain feeling, or sit with like this sadness. And because I think that what you're naming is that there's like a lot of sadness and grief at this moment, and we don't get to process that with each other, right? We're just expected to just put on our bootstraps and continue to move and continue to go. And if you were to actually name it, you can only name it for like 10 minutes. And then all of your guys would be like, okay, let's move on to the next thing, right? Or we don't know how to be in space with you now because you're like crying and you're being all teary. And let's not do that. And let's get out of this discomfort. And I think that that's what we try to seek is comfort all the time in the discomfort. But I think that what's important is in naming our own places of hurt and sadness is really to stick in that, right? To be comfortable in that uncomfortable, as the cliche goes, and to keep pushing that, and to really explore that with each other. Because I think that we don't get to explore that piece, and it's like sad and heartbreaking that, you know, Black men in particular, as you shared, are the ones who are systemically, through state violence, being harmed because they aren't seen as men. They aren't seen as human beings. They aren't seen as valuables. And I think that there's been a history of that here in this country, right? Through the lynchings and the lynch mobs that drag Black men out into public spaces and really like, and then like the killing and the brutal killings, quote unquote, you know, like a trigger here, the brutal killing of like cutting off his penis and scrotum, and that's what we've all seen, right? Or being dragged in that kind of a way if you weren't really seen as a man in this country. And so I think that that really stems from that place. And I think the parallel to domestic violence or violence against women and girls is that it's the same system, right? It's the same system of power and control. It's the same system of like law and order. Even in domestic violence situations, it's really about law and order. Like she didn't do what she was supposed to do, right, in heterosexual relationships. And that's why he did what he did. And he was the husband, he was the father, so he gets to do that, right? And the same thing here, I think about like how I heard the police chief down in Kenosha talking about like, well, the shooting that happened, right, with the 17-year-old that came out with the gun and he was shooting, and the police chief was like, well, those two people got shot and are killed because they shouldn't have been out there. And he's like not blaming anybody for it, but blaming everybody for being there. And it's like, well, but I thought you were about law and order and I thought you were about keeping people safe, but why are you not putting any blame in any direction or having people take responsibility for this? And I get that you want to say, okay, all of them are responsible for this, but like there's been harm done here, right? There's been violence that has been done here. And so there's just this preferential treatment to like Black bodies and white bodies, particularly in this case, Black men being sort of seen as not viable, not valuable, not man enough, and not worthy of living, and that we could take away their lives at any moment. And I think that that's really frustrating and upsetting. And I don't know how else to say it, but it's just like so much in there, right?
Yeah, I can personally relate to so much of what has already been said here. There's just a deep heaviness I feel personally, and you can see that others are feeling that too, you know, with all of the things that are happening and continue to happen. And I know for me and my family, you know, we're very lucky and privileged that both myself and my wife, Amy, are able to work remotely from home. So we're, you know, we've been trying to figure out how to balance working from home as well as caring for and entertaining constantly our almost 2-year-old toddler. And it's super challenging. And it's even, you know, it's even hard to put into words, you know, because I've never experienced anything like this time that we're in now. And so it almost feels like every day, you know, my wife and I check in. How are you doing? What do you need today? How busy are you? You know, where can I come in? And do you need me to come and make lunch for us? Or how can I support through everything going on? So I think for me, as a man, as a masculine person, what I've been struggling with is really naming, I think, paying what you said, like some of those feelings of sadness, like a deep, deep sadness and loneliness, you know, missing my people, missing my loved ones, and being able to get those hugs and, you know, high fives or whatever it is. You really don't realize, you know, what a gift that is until now we're here sitting, you know, staring at each other on a computer screen. And so I would say it's been very difficult for us to manage, to try to find balance with all of the things. And then, you know, we're having lots of conversations after our little one goes to bed about, okay, well, now what has happened here in Kenosha? And so we're having lots of those really intentional conversations between the two of us, where it's, you know, the biggest question we're asking is, how can we be helpful? How can we be supportive? What is our role in this time? And so I think, you know, these conversations, I think, will help bring that out for hopefully, you know, myself and us, and then those who are watching as well.
I agree with all of you. As a Latino, for me, it's been sorry, very, very challenging too, especially with my daughters. Especially when my daughters inform us that they want to go to the protests, and they want to be there just because our community has been affected also. And when you watch the TV, you see that a lot of these specific protests turn to this battlefield, so they're unsafe. So how we can encourage my daughter to step up, concentrate on her values and the importance of, loving each other, but at the same time, how we can send my daughters there when I know that it's not a safe place. So it's been very challenging. It's scary, but at the same time, giving the courage and say, you know what, let's go during the day, so we know there's more police, is more calm, and normally then in the afternoon just turn to, like I said before, like battlefield. It's not safe, and how we can support some of my community friends that there may be undocumented, that they don't have the same right, they don't have the same benefits, but at the same time they also want to make a difference. They want to stand for what is right. So it's a very challenging time, but it's also a time to as a community work together, just because most of us, we don't agree with what is going through. So how we can as a community stand up and start making the changes that they're gonna be the base for the future, for grandkids or daughters. So this is a time, very very painful time, but a time of change that is required spaces like this, like we're having right now, to have these conversations and see how we can work together, what kind of resources are out there in order to support these communities of color, and just to make a difference for the world that we live.
I really appreciate, there's so many important things that have already sort of come up in what you all are sharing, but the way that you guys named the actual being with the feelings of what are happening in this time, both when it relates to COVID, but also with the violence that's happening, particularly to Black folks, but Native folks and folks of communities of color across the board really are impacted in such deep ways. And it just makes me think about, like, going to the protests, being out in the street. That is, like, it's a lot of things. It's a way of showing up and being counted and being seen. When I've been a part of those things, it feels like you're a part of something that's actually moving. And during COVID, it's got this power to it, because you're not with people, and then all of a sudden you're in the street with 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, like, moving and chanting, and it's a place where you feel like you can feel the collective anger and the collective sadness and the collective sense that something's got got to change. And I think that's an important part. And obviously during COVID, you know, people are feeling a pull of whether or not you can be in community in those ways, just like you were talking about, Felix, too. But the part about actually being with the sadness and, you know, the sadness and all of the feelings of anger and upset and worry and sadness and shame and a whole bunch of other things that come with when you see violence like exacted on somebody, you know, George Floyd. You see that video and you know, the things that it brings up in us, because we are human and we are supposed to empathize and have a sense of connection and a sense of responsibility and a sense of relationship to him. That's like that's a deep thing. But we, I think men in particular, and I think white folks also are socialized in particular, like it's really a part of our identity, the way that we are taught to like fit into this society and be productive in the way that the society wants us to, for us to like wall off and avoid feeling those things of what's happening to others, or even to consider what the effect is on, you know, undocumented folks who are trying to participate in addressing some of these community solutions, like that ability to actually feel. But when you do get a moment, it's like it can be pretty overwhelming too, right? Like the level of pain, the level of sadness, and then the fact that like if you are open to feeling it, you can tell that, like I can tell that my relationship with other people, with Black folks in community, with people who are experiencing these things in different ways, with people who want solutions and want things to be addressed, like it is impacted. I'm not specifically the person with a knee on George Floyd's neck, but the way that I'm positioned in community, like it creates disconnection and distrust and all sorts of things that they're painful. They hurt. They're sad. They're like an interruption of the way that love and energy and people can move and flow in community. So, I mean, I think that for me, like feeling that stuff has been both an intense and a positive thing. And it also relates to me to like the question of, you know, for me, it's what do straight cisgendered men, like white men, what is our role in community at this point in time? But like, it's a time when if we are going to face into the questions that exist, we have to not only say that's not okay, but we also kind of have to answer the question, like, who are we? Who are we actually going to be in a way that doesn't continue to perpetuate the violence and allow for the violence and justify away the violence over and over and over again? And in order to know who we're going to be, that's like COVID. There's no better time than COVID to get the time and the space that you actually need to sort of sit and get a sense of who you might be at more of a core level and where you might come from and what your connection to different peoples are. But that is some work that is very much about feeling and emotions. And like you said, Pang, it's like we are not necessarily, we certainly aren't shown the way to do that well when we're in, as men or as folks who are socialized the way that we are.
Right. You know, I was thinking when the two of you were sharing and talking, was like, when we see all like the quote unquote rioting and looting, quote unquote, that's being referred to, it's really the language of people who have not been heard. It's that the system and the policies that have been built, which is really built on the premise and ideas that certain people, even though it may not look like that, right? Like, even though we may believe that it's different and that people have access, that people can achieve and get any opportunity they want, in actuality, there's these institutions and these systems, meaning institutions, meaning like the state capitol building that we are, and City Hall, things like that, like the criminal justice system itself, that has its own policies that actually dictate who are victims and who gets justice and who are the people who are seen as the perpetrators, quote unquote, right? And so if we think about, I mean, this is like maybe a far-reaching parallel, but I think we think about, like, I was thinking about, like, when the American Revolution was happening, right? And the Boston Tea Party and folks wanting to achieve independence for America, even though there's so much things that we can actually process in all of that and what that means as well. But just looking at that part and alluding to, like, the Boston Tea Party, of like how people went out at night and threw out all the tea and dumped it into the river that was there. I don't know which one it was, but it was law, and the British, and how the British thought about the English, quote unquote, at that time, right? About like not following law and order. And this is not how you do if you're going to change law and order. And we hear sentiments of that at this moment, right? Like, if only, like in this instance, it's if only like Jacob followed the directions of the officers, he wouldn't get killed. And if only George followed the directions of the officers, he wouldn't get killed. But if we look at the two parallels, it's like they followed and still nothing gets done. They followed and still they get killed, right? And lives can still get lost. And so I think that when we really look at like all of the things that happen to me at night, it's really, people aren't heard. People are tired and people are exhausted and people are frustrated. And it's like, how else are we going to get attention if we don't actually, property doesn't get destroyed, right? How else is it that we're going to get attention? Because we want to be heard and we want to be seen. And if people continue not to get seen and not to get heard, then things will continue to keep happening. And I think that we have to understand that, because we've seen that in instances, not only like history in this country, right? But history in other countries when revolution is going to happen, when lives get lost and property get destroyed because people don't get heard, and the process that they were entering into has a power dynamic of the person who is in power is going to control what that process looks like, and is going to always have, an advantage of how they dictate what the solution is and how they come about in terms of coming to an agreement on what it is. And so I think that, I'm not articulate as I could be in sharing with all of you, but I'm just thinking about like all the ways in which people think about like how revolutions in this world and in this country happen. Like, revolutions didn't just happen with like people following law and order. Like I think about like for the Hmong folks, when my ancestors were fighting French colonization in Laos and Thailand, the Hmong folks weren't like, oh, let's just keep following you and let's be okay with the French taxing our people heavily when we're so poor and we could not even afford a lot of things, but we were being taxed so heavy. My ancestors were being taxed so heavy. Like, did they just stay and follow law and order? Obviously, you had some people who had to, right? And then you had some people who had to also be like, no, we're not going to take this, and we're going to have to speak louder than this. And I think that that's what we're seeing, is that it's okay for us to be able to see the different ways in which people are showing up, and be able to actually like understand how people are showing up. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that the way in which people are showing up to these rebellions and these protests are the way that people are going to show up so that they can be heard and that they can be seen, right? And I think that gets acknowledged. And I think governors, both Governor Walz and Governor Evers both acknowledge those things, but it's like, then what are you going to do if you've acknowledged that people have the right to actually show up and be heard, and not just like be heard only, right? But like that there are actually tangible steps in terms of the policy and the legislation that's going to happen on the back end, not just on the front end, right? Because we've seen too much of this, and too much of the police violence that's happened, and there's got to be some end to it at some point.
I know for me that just brings back, you know, what I've learned about the history of the LGBTQ plus community as well. You know, we've seen revolutions and fighting back against power, fighting back against, you know, rich people and those who would use violence against the other, quote unquote. I think back to the Stonewall riots and even before that, Compton Cafeteria, where specifically Black and brown trans women, trans feminine folks were the ones who stood up and who said, we're done with this. We've had enough, you know, and so I think as much as I've learned, you know, it has always been Black and brown folks who are leading those revolutions. And, you know, when I think about my role as a, you know, white, queer, trans person, that's really what I'm thinking about is how can I hear more of those voices? How can I start listening to their calls for action? You know, what do they need? Do they need money? Do they need mutual aid? Do they need people to show up in the streets? And that's a whole nother conversation that's happening within the transgender community, especially, is that Black trans women are systematically being murdered. I mean, we've lost so many trans women in the last month, 2 months, you know, the beginning of this year. And I've seen a lot of those Black trans activists saying, you know, it's all Black Lives Matter. We have to look at every intersection, every subgroup of our communities and make sure that those people are actually protected, that they're being seen, that their voices are being heard.
Yeah, and I also think I really love this piece, Peng, about like the voice of people who haven't been heard and thinking about it from the perspective of the communities and the peoples that I come from. You know, two of my identities being white and identifying as a man. It's interesting to think about which part of you actually does get heard and what voice you actually do want to have be heard, because I would say that both men and white folks are people who have learned and benefited in the material sense anyway from using violence, from using like abusive forms of power, from leveraging and exploiting people in order to have that portion, like the voice, heard in such a way where there's an imbalance in power, there's an imbalance in resources, and that's part of what's creating the conditions for others who aren't in those categories to need to resort to many different ways of having voices heard. But part of the question for me is, and I think this time of COVID is like is a really interesting opportunity to take a beat, to take a second and ask the question. So for me as a man, for instance, or as a white person in this community, like what is the voice that actually should be heard? Who is the person that like that can be in right relationship? You know, where is it inside of me? Can I find it? Can I actually cultivate that voice? And that doesn't mean that I'm going to become the loudest one with the speakerphone, like drowning out other folks' voices, Black people's voices in the protests. But it means like, can I actually be the loudest, fullest, most, maybe not loud isn't the right word, but like the most vibrant form of that person who's like, who's in connection and in relationship and in responsibility to the things around me. And I think that some of the stillness and taking the time to feel things that we've talked about allows for some opportunity to connect with that. And I think that it's a piece like, I don't know that folks need more angry white people who throw around bumper stickers type slogans and go after each other to see who's the most woke, right? I mean, I think there's a piece of the equation where it matters how much of the same message you're getting out there, and that people aren't you know, putting up like Blue Lives Matter bumper stickers on their cars. You definitely want to deal with that side of the equation. But what really matters at its core is like, can we actually be in relationship together and be in relationship with ourselves where the way that we actually cultivate the voice that hasn't been heard within us, which is the one that's connected and the one that is responsible to other people.
I think it goes back to like the question that you're asking of like, who are we becoming? Like that, I think as a man and as a masculine expressive person, at times, I would have to really ask myself that question about like, who am I becoming, right? And that's a question that I continuously should be asking myself. Of, and does this really resonate and chime and jive in with what I'm thinking about myself in terms of like that inner thought that you're asking, Ed? Because I know that sometimes what I do externally out here in the world doesn't match what I'm thinking or feeling on the inside, right? And I say that that's because and the difficulty with that is the maneuvering around like my own masculinity and my own manhood, and the people who are around me who then tell me that what I'm doing is wrong, what I'm doing is not in alignment to what men should do, and what I'm saying is not in alignment to what it means to be a whole person, right? And we get that. We police people in those kinds of ways. Like we police people to be showing up in certain ways, and that if you don't show up in this way, then that means that you don't. You're betraying, right? There's some sense of betrayal there, and I say that in light of like when with the whole George Floyd thing, and even now with Jacob's shooting as well too, is that if any of us, or if I were to speak up about like Black lives and how important it is to actually support Black folks and things like that in the community or on social media or things like that, like people in the community would be like, how could you not love your own people, right? How could you not love the people who've been hurt by Black folks as well in the community? How could you be supporting Black folks in that kind of a way when they've been, but then part of it is like, no, I'm still going back to this part about like, that's what the system has taught us, right? And the system has taught us that piece, that we should not like Black people. We should hate Black people, but take everything from Black folks as we were as refugees placed into Black neighborhoods, right? And to really think about that in terms of like that, how do I align myself internally and externally so that those alignments actually match, and I'm not like externally showing something different, and internally then can't have a place to go and actually like, oh, I need to unload, right? Because I'm so stressed out and life is so stressed out. And I think that it's important for us as men and masculine folks to be able to find spaces like this at a kitchen table and be able to say to our friends and buddies, like, help me process this, because I don't know how I cannot do this, right? And I want to be aligned more internally to my own values that are about like people, are about connection, that are about the willingness and the freeness of people to be able to choose freely, right? And not be restricted to how they show up, and not be told that this is the only way in which you can show up, and that's the only way in which you can be a man in this world or a whole person, and that those definitions are stuck in me, and then I don't know how to do that. And I think that this is the opportunity for us in this moment to make sure that as men and masculine folks, we create spaces where we're not isolating, because social distance isn't about isolating. It's just about physically making sure you're staying apart, but doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to the men in your lives, right?
I love what you just said, Peng. I think you hit the nail right there. Also, the effect that if we're struggling right now with that, just imagine the newer generations are going through this. This young kids watching TV, exposed to social media, getting all this misinformation. How that's gonna affect them? If we don't take the right steps in order to create, a base or a better understanding. This is the time to do it, and it's gonna take us all to work together to be able to do that, because if we're struggling, just imagine our kids.
I know I think about that a lot. I mean, as a newish father, you know, I mean, we're constantly thinking about how can we be that good role model for our kids? How can we show how to show up and be connected into community and not just, you know, an individual family living in an individual neighborhood. And I think about, you know, that felt hard before COVID to be that good role model and to, you know, to explain to her when I yell at her that, you know, hey, dad was wrong. I shouldn't have yelled at you. I shouldn't have let that anger, that stress come out at you. And then to be in this place now, this time and place where, you know, I feel like instead of starting from like this normal place every day I wake up and I'm already sort of ramped up. And so that's, you know, that's coming out more and more, I think. I'm observing, you know, on my partner, on my wife, and on my kid, you know, so how do I take care of myself to where I can be that good, you know, father figure and be like an equal co-parent with my wife. So how am I taking care of myself? And then how am I actually being really honest with Amy, my partner, when I'm saying, you know, those things that I'm feeling? Hey, you know what? I actually need a break right now. I need to go outside. You know, my stress is way up, or I'm really anxious, or I'm feeling frustrated. And I know that this isn't a good time for me to be around our kid, you know, so being real about how I'm feeling, it feels scary to do that, to just be honest and to say, I'm not doing great. And I feel like for me, that's, you know, more often the case these days is I'm not doing great. I feel like, you know, we're all just trying to survive. But in those moments when I am able to share and say, I'm really sad, or I'm feeling ashamed because I messed up and yelled at our kid earlier. You know, once we're able to actually communicate those things, it's like where we can see that growth is possible, you know?
I think you alluded to some really good critical pieces there, Sean, in terms of like what I've learned over the years in working with men and masculine folks and engaging them to be healthier versions of themselves, right? And that they want to be well-meaning and they want to be good men, you know, in community. And that's all that's asked is how do you get to that place? But you have to be really intentional, right? You have to be really, really intentional, really question the moves and the motives and the intentions and how you're and why you're behaving the way that you're behaving. Because if we don't, all of us have been socialized to be rigid in understanding like, oh, I better keep it to myself. I better not talk to anybody. I better not be vulnerable here. I better make sure I show up manly. I better make sure I show up in a very masculine way, expressing, and I better not let my guard down at all, because if the moment I do, somebody's gonna be like, oh, you're such a wuss, right? Or you're such a the P word, and you're not a man here, right? So we don't want, the thing is that we don't want each other to find out that each other isn't a man. And what I think I appreciate about being in space with all of you is that I get to be acknowledged as a man and acknowledged as a masculine person without having to prove to any of you in the time that I've had relationship with all of you that I didn't have to prove, that I could just show up and that you accept me as it is. And I think that that's what we need is like, if we're going to cultivate healthier versions of men in community and healthier versions of masculine expressing people in community and in our own lives, we need to accept men where they're at. That doesn't mean we don't get to push each other in terms of questioning where each other's at in terms of your beliefs and your thinking. But like that, we have hope that there's some like real tangible ways in which you can actually change, right? Because all of us have started from that place. It came from that. I know I had in all of the time that I've been working towards a healthier version of who Peng is and how I am as a man, and I show up and really asking the how question, right? Because the how question gets me to really think about it, like Ed said, on the inside rather than external, because we often for men is like the what question. And that gets us to think about like, what are others doing for us? Why can't they know that I'm at this place? Why doesn't my partner know I'm stressed out at this moment? She can't read my mind. and then she may read my behavior cues, right? My nonverbal cues, but that doesn't give enough to her, right? And so she's supposed to assume and just take care of me, right? Through my nonverbal cues. And then she doesn't get it right. And then I get even more upset when she doesn't get it right, right? It's like, you're just supposed to know. But in actuality, I'm the confused one because I don't know, right? I'm the one that is maybe not all there because I'm the one that doesn't get it. And so I just think about all those things that I think for us as men and masculine folks is for us to really cultivate spaces like this to be able to explore those things. And like sort of summing up here and giving you all a chance to also close as well too is like, this is what we want. The takeaway is that we each get a chance to explore ourselves in a space and in a place where it's allowed and that we can be vulnerable, we can let our guard down, we can take off whatever it is that we're wearing every day, the mask that we wear every day, as you know, the cliche of the mask you live in video that some of us have seen. Like we put those things on, you know, we put on our uniform every day, we put on a mask every day, and then we come home, and when we take it off, then some of us don't know how to take it off, and we take it off, and then we become ourselves, and we throw it onto our loved ones at home, and that's not the healthiest thing, is by expressing and putting our stress onto others at home, especially to our loved ones, to care for it. And then I think there's just so much here. There's just so much in our conversation today of like, we went everywhere, right? We went externally, then we went internally, and we explored like that these are challenges I know that I constantly navigate as a masculine and man person on a daily basis. And so I look forward to the continued conversations in 2 weeks, and I know Sean will share with all of us when we come back and what we're going to probably talk about the next time as well. But I give it to all of you to also do some closing thoughts here as well.
Yeah, just very excited about, these upcoming conversations and, really digging in. And so for all of you watching, we would love for you to tune in to our next conversation. As Peng mentioned, we're going to be talking like this, 4 to 6 folks who are men and masculine identified people every other week. The next one will be on Thursday, September 10th, and that is at noon. And to start off, we're going to be recording these and sharing them out live at some point as well. So we really want to connect with all of you. If you have questions, if you have comments or reflections, what do you want to hear us talk about? What's going on with you in your life and in your family and community? Let us know. Again, this will be up on YouTube and we'll share it on various platforms. But stick with us and we'll hopefully see you at the next one.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to be with you all. I mean, one of the things that sticks out to me in summary is that how much I actually love being in space with you all, and that actually you are all people that I love, in the way that I feel about you and our relationship. And that's something that men oftentimes don't express either, is the love, but the reality is that Peng mentioned that we can put our guards down. It's also true that just being on the screen in this case with you all, like, I have more energy than I had when I started. I feel like I've learned some things, and things have been, peaked in my brain. I've had my heart and my gut has been like nourished in some ways, and like that's what it's always like to be with you guys, and that's like really meaningful. And I think it shows that we all come from places where we know how to be in relationship, where we flex and we support and we care for one another in different conditions and in different times. And part of what I heard in the conversations that we're talking about is that whether it's, you know, in the way that we are communicating with our partners, or the way that we learned to like look at our position and our place in community, or the biases that we've learned, like there are, we are connected to people, and we have the ability within ourselves to learn and explore with one another how to be in better relationship with each other, and that we actually have a responsibility to do so. It's not just so much that we can, but that it is a beautiful thing to do so. And if you're not, you know, it's really a part of what we see reflected in the violence that we're seeing all around us. So thank you all for the time together.
Well, what can I get from this? A lot of hope. After listening to all of you guys, it just remind me that there's a lot of loving, compassionate, you know, men and masculine folks out there that think like me, that they want to make a difference. And sometimes we don't know what to do. We don't know where to go if we don't do this type of work. So it's very important to, you know, listen to each other, support each other, just because we are the key, you know, as everybody, women, girls, you know, everybody, we are what is needed to make a difference, you know, the importance of stepping up, you know, for what is right, you know, make other people accountable. So very happy to be here, be surrounded such amazing group of folks, and looking forward to the next call to hear what people gonna type in, you know, in YouTube, see some of their questions, hopefully, so we can do a better job and bring topics that are relevant to each community, and then we can start answering those questions that we have in our heads, you know, and how we can do a better job. So thank you, everyone. Love you guys all, and looking forward for the next call. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm feeling very similarly. I feel like today's chat was just a gift and something that I really needed, honestly. Oftentimes I get to a place where I don't even realize, you know, I'm not able to, or in a habit of checking in with myself to see how am I really doing. And so I think these conversations, you know, create that space where we can each kind of, you know, take some time to reflect. And also, you know, Felix, I relate to what you said. Oftentimes I forget that I'm, you know, not just one single person. I'm a member of a community. And I oftentimes think, well, you know, no one else is going through this. No one else is feeling this. And we all are going through it together. We're all feeling, you know, a lot of the same feelings, fears, anger, and also hope and joy, and finding those things in our everyday life. So I am, again, grateful to each of you, you know, and for me to be invited into this conversation, and I hope that other folks will join as well.